So, welcome Maribeth to the podcast. Maribeth and I met not so long ago at a tech event in Miami, and she's got a fascinating background. Started in big finance in New York, worked at a number of very prestigious firms, and most recently, she's the founder and owner of an analytics uh, company that serves financial services clients. Um, Mary Beth, would you like to introduce yourself beyond what I just described?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here. Uh, and it was great meeting you at that event at the Lab Miami. I am the co-founder and CEO of Sapien Advisors. And what we're all about is myself and my partner, Sandy McCarran. We bring strategy, execution, and how to monetize building data-driven products, primarily for enterprise in fintech and for mid-market financial services. And then now with how things are developing also with AI agents, we're also starting to get into like how to figure out internal AI solutions for firms as well. That's what we do.
Very cool. So let's start right at the beginning. So you had a pretty, you know, I want to call it conventional sort of start in financial services. You started your career, it looks like, at FactSet, right? And spent a number of years at FactSet. What kind of a role was that? And for our listeners, if you could just briefly describe what FactSet does.
Yeah, sure. I'll describe what FactSet does. I actually got turned on to FactSet actually from my very first job out of college, which was at Value Line, and I was an equity research assistant. And Value Line at the time and had put their data or their content on FactSet, and FactSet was one of the platforms that started to come up. I will date myself in the mid 90s. And so I used their software, and I actually got to know one of the consultants on the account, and he was like, "Oh, we're hiring," and I was like, "Oh, interesting." So I went for an interview, and I liked the company and all the customer service, and I said, "You know what? I'll get to learn a lot by meeting clients, and helping them with the FactSet software." And so FactSet, for anyone out there, is a data information provider, and they aggregate data from a number of different sources: financials, news, pricing, ownership, public and private companies. They're really known for portfolio analytics in the asset management and hedge fund space, also quantitative tools as well, and have moved into investment banking and wealth. When I joined, it was a much smaller company. It's now an S&P 500 company. It was around 100 people, and so it was a much smaller organization at the time. But I got to work with asset management and clients with the analysts and portfolio managers on like how to use the software, training them, building their quantitative models, their financial models, and mainly in New York and also the Boston area.
Okay, that's super interesting because it's hard to imagine that FactSet was ever 100 people in size. It's a behemoth now.
Yes, yes. It is very hard to imagine. When I started FactSet, the two founders had a Monday morning meeting, and everyone could fit into the conference room for the Monday morning meeting at the office. And then we outgrew that, obviously, with the size of the company now. Yeah.
So, and you spent a number of years at FactSet. So, can you describe to me what your career looked like? What was your first role, and how did it progress? Was it
Yeah,
a
and
technical kind of
yeah.
role, or was it client facing? Was it a more business oriented kind of role?
Yeah, so what the role was FactSet for every client has a consultant that works with the users, whether it's training them, creating models, screens, working with the customers for any questions, to really give that white glove service, right, to the clients. And you're almost an extension of their research teams or portfolio management teams on the buy side. They also have clients on the sell side as well. But what I enjoyed was as the clients would work with the product, and I would go back to engineering or whatnot about client requests or the things they saw in the product, because it always was trying to get the feedback. I thought it was so interesting how the engineers create these solutions and the product people. I was like, wow, this is like fascinating. Like they help them and we solve their problems. And that made me start to say, well, I think I want to actually change my career a bit and go more into being on the solutions and product side. The firm very much believes in people, though understanding how the customers, and I was very lucky where they actually, and they still do to this day, they will actually sponsor everything for you to get your CFA, your Charter Financial Analyst charter, which I did there. So it really gave me the best way of like to understand what the clients were doing, their problems, and the solution. So that's when I decided to leave FactSet and go to Georgetown, and I wanted to go back to business school for strategy, marketing, and technology, and really kind of get that under my belt before going back, going into like product. So.
I see. Very interesting. So I didn't know that actually. So you quit FactSet to go to business school, and you got the CFA in between.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went back to business school, went to Georgetown, and I did anything I could do to take. I took this one professor, like all of his classes. He was very much strong in like tech marketing and strategy. Took every class he had. Went to as many tech conferences as I could, learning as much as I could. And when I graduated, which was not the best time to graduate, was after 9/11, but an interesting opportunity presented itself, and it was actually working for a startup that was backed by Merrill Lynch Global Research. And basically it was about bringing in all of Merrill Lynch's analyst models and their data and putting it into a software platform to the sales and traders, and actually making them smarter to actually talk to customers about Merrill Lynch and like their global research and the trades and the sales assistants and on the trading floor. So I actually was at a startup that was like funded by Merrill Lynch and embedded in the organization. I was there for about 3 years. And I learned a ton in that, and it was a great experience. And it was like my first taste of working for a startup. So it was an interesting experience. So the funny thing is, which will bring me back to FactSet in my story, basically the group I worked with interfaced with FactSet, then started collecting estimates and research from banks to put on their platform, and my old boss would come to Merrill Lynch from time to time. And one day he asked me, would you come back to FactSet? And FactSet, if you had a good track record, they will take you back. And you have different experience, and you can go and you can grow and bring that back in a different role. So I went back to work in product in the investment banking group at FactSet for sell-side research, sales and trading. So research, so sales trading, yeah. And so working on those products with the estimates, the research, the publishing systems for research, and all that. So that was like, I was what they call sometimes a FactSet repeat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I have two questions for you. So you did, what stood out was you did the CFA, I did too. It was arduous and grueling. And then you got an MBA. So do you feel those two things helped your career at all? Do you recommend it to, people who are just starting their careers, maybe contemplating doing one or both?
Yeah, let's see. Well, one, I think for my role at FactSet, and they still encourage it. It gave me though, like the language and what people were doing, and like really applying deep in finance, right? investment management, asset management. I mean, it's definitely the credential that people really value in that. For MBA, I always tell people, well, it doesn't necessarily teach you a particular thing. It teaches you, I would say, ways to think about things or frame them. I always say to people, I might not know something about something, but I can figure it out. And I just feel like that's what that gave me there. So it definitely helps now with what we're doing, at Sapien in understanding, what people do, right, in financial services. Also having now not just worked in equities, but having worked in credit at Moody's before for starting this, so and understanding like multi-asset class and all that, that's extremely helpful in understanding, what the trends are in the market and then things going on also with software and all that with fintech and everything. So, I mean, they both have helped, but in different ways.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with you about the CFA. That's why I got it as well. I used to work in tech in financial services and I've been working there for a number of years, but I didn't really know, sort of the basics of finance, if you will. And, so it was a good opportunity and a good way to figure all that stuff out, different asset classes, how asset allocation works, basics of economics. And then, just having the CFA feels good because it's not trivial to get. You have to work hard.
Yes, yeah, it's a lot of weekends in the library,
Yes.
to say the least.
And for 3 years in a row, you can forget about your springtime, basically.
Yes, and it's always like the weekend after Memorial Day, so your Memorial Day weekend is shot.
Yeah.
So yeah, so now I really enjoy Memorial Day, so more than ever.
Okay, so from the startup, from there you went back to FactSet, spent a good number of years there, and then went to Moody's, which I'm going to say is a similar kind of firm in that it operates in finance, but really is a data and software kind of company.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. When I was thinking about like what I wanted to do next, and I actually contacted. I actually had seen a role or seen some roles there, and I actually contacted somebody who was from FactSet that I knew that was at Moody's Analytics, and we had and definitely taught me a lesson. You definitely want to, you never know when these things present yourself, and through your network. So I remember her. What she said, "Oh, actually, I think there's another role that you would actually be better for. Send me my resume. It just opened up." So I sent her my resume, and she walked over, and it turned out that I think a couple of years before that, I actually met the hiring manager that was in that role when I was at FactSet bringing on Moody's content. So it was in his group, and he was like, "I know her. I've met her." It was his open. So I had met him in meetings between FactSet and Moody's. So it was kind of serendipity. And so basically I went to Moody's. I thought it was a great opportunity where I hadn't done anything with credit. Had never worked for a credit rating. It was connected with a credit rating agency. You could learn a lot. So, even though Moody's Analytics is the financial technology solution side of Moody's, but we did do a lot with the ratings agency because we did everything with the ratings and the research as a subscription on CreditView. And then I worked on the part where we were actually building out the distribution to get the press releases and the research on the different media outlets and platforms and aggregators like a FactSet.
Yeah.
And then also, how do we get that directly to clients? So off platform, how do we get that content out there to our clients and to the public?
Okay, very interesting. Now, so these are two very different kinds of, they're software companies, data and analytics is at the core of what they do. And you work with a lot of buy-side firms, sell-side firms you mentioned. So do you see a very different culture in all these different kinds of firms? Or is it
Uh,
the same sort of speed? It's all New York, it's all crime.
no, they're all very different. I think you probably, even in your career, probably when you were in Boston and you can go to the different firms in Boston, I'm sure that each one was different. With Moody's, it grew out. Moody's Analytics grew out of the rating agency, so there's a heavy influence from the rating agency and how it's regulated. FactSet wasn't a regulated rating agency, right? So that's a very different thing. There was Chinese walls between the two. So it operated differently. They thought differently on things. Moody's culture from the rating agency, everything is about a lot of consensus building and getting those views out there, which is different working for a pure software technology company like FactSet. So it was a different culture, different dynamic, and yeah, and two companies going through two very different things too for them.
Okay. And then I see you did something very interesting and very unusual. You went and worked for the CFA Institute, is that right? What brought
Yeah,
that about, and what were you doing for the CFA Institute?
I actually was working for the managing director of global solutions in the Americas for the CFA,
Okay.
and it was global client solutions. So I was the chief of staff of like those bringing those initiatives together. The CFA has gone through their own evolution, so it was with how they were bringing out their ESG certificate, their other certifications, those programs, and making sure that they were all packaged and the events correctly. And then also they have people who actually are account managers with the various different institutions that work with them, as well as all the societies as well, because there's a whole membership there, and getting those programs out for the societies, because they do a lot with the solutions with the members and whatnot.
Okay. And, I can't not ask what you were doing where were you during the financial crisis? Were you at FactSet? Well,
Yes, I was at FactSet at the time, yes.
okay. And
It was,
was it stressful to be at FactSet, or did you escape the brunt of
I
it?
think like anyone, it was stress because, nobody really knew what was going to happen. I have to say, one of the great things about the company, which they did, and they still do today, like a number of other data providers, is they made anybody who wasn't working, during the financial crisis, and you had been a FactSet client, they kind of treated them like friends of FactSet, and they could have a free FactSet terminal, so that they could stay abreast of the markets, do their work, whether they were interviewing, whatever they were. So that was, I think a great thing that the firm did, supporting those people. And I know other firms like Bloomberg and others do the same thing, even, now as well.
Okay. Well, that's nice of them. So at
Yeah.
what point did you start to sort of feel the itch to do your own thing and consider
Yeah.
consulting? Was
Yeah,
it
I had
years
considered
ago?
I had considered it when I was at Moody's, because I then had actually worked in the innovation team and worked on a startup program, and then after Moody's, after the CFA Institute, I decided to work for a startup era, which was a great experience, doing product strategy and partnerships, and took a step back last year and just said to myself, do I want to, be an operator and work there at a firm? What do I really want to do, at this point? And I've seen certain problems in the market. I've, worked with AI or machine learning traditional methods since 2007, starting with NLP at FactSet, and then going on to, newer types of machine learning and AI with generative AI and also speech to text and whatnot. So I said, I see a lot of people going after the shiny new thing, I see, which I think is great, like non-technical founders, people who are subject matter experts wanting to build companies and they have ideas, but they don't know quite how to do it. So you have your vision, but like how do you take that vision and make it, execute on it? And I take care of the product strategy side and I do a lot of the strategy. And Sandy, my partner, she's done scale ups in a number of firms of taking you 5 to 100 people within a year and working on the agile operations. So she really works on with the team when we come out with, because we do design sprints and prototyping and all that, and getting to the requirements of what you're going to build. But she works with a team to make sure they implement it and do it efficiently, and we can empower them. So, but one of the things, just to take a step back as I say this, is I've seen a lot of people working on the models and the machine learning, and we've also, at the same time, there's two sides of that coin. There's the data, and then you need a lot of times a UX, and if you don't have all three pieces, you can't deliver value. So having come from the data business and information data, and data needs to be, doesn't work unless, especially in financial services or others. We take everything like a holistic way of what we're going to do with the strategy, making sure the data strategy and what you need to do, you have a good foundation of what you're building and guiding people, because they don't it's really like there's a lot of education going on with these non-technical founders. And then we also have a lot of folks now, also we've started working with a couple partners with mid-market companies who are trying to bring in AI solutions into their organization, and they have issues of trying to figure out the use case, and also the data is, again, having that data readiness for that is important for those as well. And it's something we set this up over a year ago, we didn't think about, but as things have evolved, we've gotten more interest from people and working with them on their internal solutions as well.
That's cool. So where did you meet your co-founder? Did you work with her in the past, or?
Yeah, we actually worked together 10 years ago at Moody's, and Sandy and I were in the team that worked on the Moody's website, but she moved over to the Moody's innovation team, the accelerator, and I also was working over there, came to work on doing product discovery. And what happened was she wanted to roll out design sprints, and I started talking to the data scientists. And this is something I always tell people in product: just talk to your engineers, because they will have ideas that you'll never think of. And I started talking to them, and their issue was we have to do all this data labeling to train our models. And then I started asking them, like, well, what does that mean? And what are you doing? And then as they explained, I was like, you guys do know that we have credit analysts that manually go through unstructured documents, and it's not been modernized. Mm-hmm. And they were like, what are you talking about? And I started explaining to them. And so basically we started looking at the firm at use cases. We went and we learned about the munis use case, corporates. We learned about capital structure, everything, because they have hundreds of pages and they have to go through and take it out. And we actually went and did a design sprint, and Sandy got to do her first design sprint at Moody's and then roll them out elsewhere in the firm and even at her next firm. And then when I left, I was thinking about starting Sapien. We started talking about my skill set and her skill set, like coming together with that.
Okay. So you guys have worked together for a very long time. And when just a question about these design sprints. So a few years back, there was this thing that had become really popular, design thinking. Is that what you're talking about? Was it
Yeah, so with a design sprint, what's great about that is, especially also with cross-functional teams. So we had this hypothesis that, there could be a tool that would help analysts take pieces of information out. And also remember too, in Moody's, we had different teams going into the same document, taking information out, and they're in one person's spreadsheet, another person's spreadsheet, in this database, there. So it was like, gosh, we have all this work being redone. Like, there's got to be a way to centralize it. So we had, and also we had our hypothesis, and we'd done a bunch of use cases. And so what we did was a design sprint basically takes a team, a cross-functional team, would be a product person, you have a UX designer, you have a technical lead, a facilitator, and what you do is you start in the beginning, talking about like what the mission and your hypothesis. You do some interviews of the market in the beginning, and then you do a series of exercises with design thinking and whatnot, and we create a prototype. And then at the end of the week, you put it in front of people, and you have a real user interview, and you get feedback. Mm-hmm. And you actually start to even tweak it as you get the feedback to validate it. One of the great things about a design sprint is it kind of shrinks like all this work you would do for like 3 months into a week. And you can very quickly, before you even decide to do any code, decide whether you should proceed or not with some information. And then what we did is we added another 2 weeks from that, because we were getting good results just in that week from the interviews. We actually did another 2-3 weeks of interviews and kept tweaking it. And what happens is it informs what your MVP, your minimum, the requirements are, what you need, and helps you get very focused on, one target market, one persona, and get you get all that information, and it's very data driven, and it informs, and it actually, and I always tell people, even if you go and you decide that your idea was not right, it's better than you spending all this money and putting all this development dollars on it, and and finding out and having done that research, that user validation.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk about your consulting company. So you described how you met your co-founder, then some point last year you guys took the plunge and started Sapien Advisors. Now, data is a broad field, and even the intersection of data and financial services is a fairly broad field. So where do you guys fit in? And if I understand correctly, you advise companies on how they should think about data, not necessarily build the systems and models that they finally want to make, but you...
and we may bring people in too. So our model is, what has developed over the last year is really almost a collective of like senior experts that we have at our disposal that we could bring in on a project. So for instance, this fall we worked with somebody who has, he's been rather successful day trader, and he wants to educate others on how to do this. And he's built a platform. And we actually, one of the things we always talk about is, well, you have a North Star and where you want to go, but your data has to be correct. And we actually went in and we did an assessment on the product and the operations. Usually we find like if there's a problem with the product, there's a problem with the operations. Founder that was non-technical. And one of the things is, the data is, I always say to people, we want to also be able to monetize that, whether it's in the front end, whether it's going to be an API, whatnot. So you have to start like where you want to go, and it starts from the ingestion or the collection of that content, and then managing that information or whatnot. So with him, he needed a lot of information in real-time data feeds and that. So I really advised him on how are you going to think about the data providers you need to work with, traditional and non-traditional providers, and how that needs to be baked in as you grow your firm, because there's the licensing costs and all that he would need to manage. So having worked for data businesses and the licensing side and the terms, we can advise someone from start of how to deal with that or how to build out their own collection. We have someone that we work very closely who has built out industrial sized databases at banks or run offshore teams. There's another engagement we're going to do, and we're going to bring him on that. So we kind of flex up and down, almost like the cloud. We can spin up, we can spin down, depending upon what we need to do. But for that, in the client, there was a lot of advising on the team and the efficiencies and the operations, but then also a lot with the whole data strategy of, first, like who you're going to be your partners and what buying that, and then how those terms are going to work as you grow that. Because what happens with a lot of fintechs or startups, as they gain traction, those bills can get very expensive. And especially with real-time exchange data, you also then have the exchange fees, and you have to figure that out as well.
Yeah. And, like the person you're talking about, he might have been a very successful day trader, but, unless he really delved into it, he wouldn't know how to tackle these problems. So I can definitely see where you guys add the value. And noted your point about, you can bring whatever skill set you need to deliver an end-to-end solution for your clients. So was this day trader your client zero, so to speak? Was he your first client? And basically what I'm trying to
He's
ask
one of our first clients. We have another client that's very different, that's more on, then we get into like some of our technical clients where they're much more technical, and they work on geospatial financial knowledge graphs. They map corporate the corporate, like geographic entities up to the beneficial ownership and out to a number of different data sets, weather, economic, environmental, carbon emissions, and then they have clients who manage their portfolios for risk, insurance, supply chain. So there's it's more of the right partnerships to build products, and also distribution channels and partnerships we've kind of worked on there. So it just depends, because we've done everything end to end in this, we're able to, we can do the whole thing or we can do components where it makes sense. So that's how we've designed things, and everybody has, and we tailor things based on your needs, right? So it's not one size fits all.
Okay. And how come you guys decided to be based out of Miami and not a major, finance hub like say?
Well, actually, we are, and our clients can be anywhere. So one client was in Miami, another client I just mentioned is in New York. And my partner Sandy actually lives right outside of New York. I'm actually in Miami these days because I'm kind of a product of the pandemic, and my husband and I were first in Texas a bit and then came to Florida, and then we decided to get a place here. We then decided to be full-time, so but I can get on a flight easy back and forth. So but we talk to people all over, and we'll deal with clients, remote or in person. So it works out well. We can take care of their needs whether we're down here or up there.
Okay, interesting. So let me put on a different hat. Suppose I'm 22 years old and I really like the sound of what you're describing, and I want to do analytics consulting in the financial services space. What stood out from the way you described everything is it's a lot of very specialized knowledge. You can get 22-year-olds who know engineering and data science modeling and all that stuff very, very well, but I think the finance side of it takes a little bit of time to sort of figure out and pick up. So do you feel this is something that's a good fit for somebody at the start of their career, or would you advise them to really, perhaps join a bank or a financial services firm to learn the industry a little bit before contemplating something like this?
I think you could go either way. What is nice about all of the data information provider firms, whether it's FactSet, whether it's Refinitiv, whether it's Bloomberg, they all have programs for college graduates, right? So they all have very in-depth training programs, right? So 8 weeks of classes, training of like how to talk to a client, how to write your email, how you act in business, managing the accounts. So, and then you're right there on the front line, so you learn everything there is, right? So, at a very young age, you get very exposed, right, to financial services and what your customers are doing. And it does happen where I've had former colleagues or whatnot, or people who have been then actually even hired by a client. And I myself had a couple times a client, be interested in me maybe joining. So it does happen. So I always tell people it's a great way to learn about the industry. And also that it brings in the technology side too, if you have an interest in that. And the training programs at all these firms are just first rate.
Yeah, and I am familiar with Bloomberg's training program, so that's true. And of course, let's not forget there's the CFA, which you can go and get if you really want to learn finance.
The a lot of these firms too will was kind of nice is like FactSet actually like they will they will pay for the fees for everything and everything that because it helps them with their clients or helps them in people understanding how to build products. There was even a couple engineers when I was at FactSet that went for their CFAs or at least sat for level 1 just to experience and see what it was like.
Yep, good point. Because when I got my CFA, I found out after the fact that my company would have paid for all of it, and I didn't.
No.
So folks should definitely look into that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. So, I always tell people whether you pass and then you fail and then you have to take it over the next year, it's still worth it. You learn a ton.
Yeah, and it's, just completing it is so satisfying. It's like running a marathon. But it's not trivial. You have to put in a lot of effort into it. So,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. It definitely needed a lot of discipline, but you learn a lot, you apply it. And I think if you actually have that, if you go for the CFA, if you think about it, and now they even have like data science certificates and they have data science and machine learning as part of it as well. And then they also have a number of papers and things with it. I think you can really get a lot of the technical finance piece, right? The application of it with the exam as well as, the other part, at these companies.
Yep. All right, Maribeth, it's been fascinating speaking with you and learning about your background and how you broke into consulting. My final question for you would be, where can people find you if they wanted to learn more about what you do and what Sapient Advisor does, if they wanted to connect with you?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, Maribeth Martorana. And then also there's our website, which is sapient-advisors.com. But also there's my email address. Feel free to send me an email at Maribeth, Maribeth, at sapient-advisors.com.
Okay. And I'll link to all of these in the description of the video.
Yeah. Anytime. I'm more than happy to chat with anyone who has a question or wants to talk.
Very good. All right, Maribeth. It's been great chatting with you.
Great. Thank you for having me. I really have enjoyed my time here.
Pleasure's all mine.
Thank you.